Hey guys, so for this week's video I'm going to be coloring one of the sketches that I showed in my Quick Sketches 2015 video. I got a lot of feedback on this sketch in particular, and a lot of you guys seem to want me to color it, so I decided I would do that. I wanted to use this particular illustration to test out one of the new inks that I recently purchased. It's not a drawing ink, it's a calligraphy ink, but I wanted to test it out to see if I could use it for drawing rather than just for like using with a fountain pen or something. So what I'm doing first is I took I scanned the original sketch because it was kind of small, and then I blew it up on my computer, printed it out, and am using my light table to transfer the sketch onto a clean piece of paper, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm transferring it onto a piece of watercolor paper, and while I'm talking about the paper I'm using, I'm going to talk about the tools that I'm using. So the ink I am using is the Diamine. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. If I am, let me know how to pronounce it down below if you know. So it's the Diamine Shimmering Seas ink, and it is as you can see, a blue calligraphy ink, but what's really unique about this ink is it has a like gold powder in it. So it has like a really beautiful gold luster in the darker areas of the ink. You won't be able to see it till towards the end of the video when the darker colors start to dry, but it's really beautiful, and I think that it suited this particular sketch really well. I am working on 9x12 Arches hot pressed watercolor paper, and to be honest, I really wish that I had used a different type of paper. I love my Arches watercolor paper, but I felt like for this ink it was a bit too the paper was a bit too toothy, so it kind of tugged on the ink a little bit. So that's something that I will know for next time when I decide to do another ink illustration, that I can use something that has a little bit less tooth than this particular paper does. But it did end up looking really good with the ink. Like, it didn't make it impossible to use. It was just a bit too toothy for my liking. It did handle the ink really well, as I said. It didn't make the paper buckle or pucker or anything like that. And this is taped down to one of my masonite boards so that it didn't like warp and get all wobbly while I was working, but it didn't really end up doing that anyway, so that wasn't really a problem. I originally wanted to use Copics to color this illustration, but once I got this ink, I got this one and a couple others, but this one really stood out as super unique and kind of like, it's really beautiful. So I decided to try this out with ink instead of using markers. And as I said at the beginning of the video, this ink is super unique since it has like gold flake in it. Like, I'm not sure if I don't think it's real gold, but it has like a luster powder in it. So when you lay down darker areas of the ink, the luster kind of comes out, and you can't really see it while the ink is wet, but once it dries, like right now in the video, you can kind of start to see it in the darker areas. It just kind of comes out onto the page, and it just creates this really cool like golden embossed effect. And I hadn't seen that in an ink before, or really any tools that I've used before, and I thought that it was super unique, so that the darker and contrasty areas of the illustration will show that gold luster more than like the lighter washed areas. The entire piece has kind of like a bit of a like dull sparkle to it because that gold luster is still in the ink even though it's been watered down. So it's kind of hard to see on video, but at the end I took some like glamour shots of this particular piece once it was dry so that you could kind of see that sparkle and you could see the gold luster, since it didn't really show up on video as well as I had hoped. But the more the diluted the ink is, which I'm diluting it with just plain water, the less gold luster will show up in it. But as I said, it does create kind of like a little bit of a sparkle throughout the whole piece, and I think that's really kind of cool, and it looks really cool. This is one of those pieces that looks a lot better in real life as opposed to like a scan or something. I always knew when I wanted to color this piece that I wanted to have it be just a single color. I really like images when they're just like one specific color and it's not like a bunch of like rainbow colors. You guys know that I prefer a more like cohesive kind of color scheme, so I like to work with as few colors as possible, so I really kind of like the just single tone kind of illustrations. Now, as for how this ink worked, I thought when I first tried it out on just like a scratch piece of paper that it would kind of behave a little bit like watercolor, and in the end it pretty much did. It's a lot more difficult to kind of blend it out, like if I wanted to blend like the ink itself into a white like off, just blended out into the white paper. I had to use a lot of water to get it to do that because it's not really designed for illustration, I guess. It's a calligraphy ink. And I did find that if I had let it dry, like right around here, you can see it happening when I'm doing it. If I re-wet a place that was dry, that ink came right back to life. Because I worked on this piece over the course of 2 days, so I let mainly around the hair, I let that totally dry overnight so that I wouldn't like pull up the ink while I was laying down the background color. But even though I let it dry that whole time, it still picked up that ink right away. So it was a bit more challenging because I had to be super careful around the places, like the small places like the eyes and the facial features and stuff, where I didn't want that color to pull up when I wet it down with water. So I had to be super careful, but other than that, it behaved very similar to watercolors. And I just really loved the way that this ended up coming out when it was done, just because of the ink is so cool. As I've said many times. You can kind of see off to the left hand side of the video, you can sort of kind of see that gold luster coming through. And the thing about this ink is when you have to shake the bottle a lot because the gold luster will sink to the bottom. So that's why the darker ink you put down, the more luster there is, because that's all sunk to the bottom. So when I was getting close to this stage and it was getting finished, I decided to just take that bottom little bit of ink that I had in my little palette and just lay it in certain places where I wanted that gold luster to show up a lot. And that's all I did, and I am pretty much done. So I have the scan and then some pretty little glamour shots so you can really see that gold luster, because it showed up on the scan, which was really surprising, but some lit shots where you can actually see them. It's very fine, like kind of gold powder, and it just is super cool, especially in certain lighting. It just really pops out and makes the piece really, like this shot, I just love. It's so cool. The gold luster is so cool. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you shortly for the next video. Bye!